Coming up on Primetime News, Korea's ruling party floor leader says he will consider the opinions of his fellow lawmakers as he faces calls to resign for backing a controversial parliamentary bill vetoed by the president. And Greece is speeding towards a default and possible exit from the eurozone as the European Central Bank decides not to extend emergency funding. Korea wins the largest stake it's ever held in a global financial organization as it signs onto the China-led development bank that launched today. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello and welcome to Primetime News on this Monday, June 29th. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us. Let's start with our first story. The ruling Saenuri Party's leadership is in crisis over a vetoed revision to the National Assembly law.
Floor leader Yoo Seung-min is under intense pressure to step down in order to ease tensions with President Park Geun-hye and her allies within the party. Our Ji Myung-gil has our top story.
As pressure mounts for Saenuri Party floor leader Yoo Seung-min to step down, members of the party's Supreme Council held a closed-door gathering on Monday to decide his fate. During the meeting, Yoo is said to have asked for another chance and some time to ponder whether or not he should carry on the job. However, Saenuri lawmakers loyal to President Park continue to urge for Yoo's resignation. They blame him for creating a rift between the president and ruling camp.
I believe floor leader Yoo Seung-min will make a wise decision for our party.
Yoo had worked with the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy Party to negotiate a deal to soften a revision to the National Assembly law as a precondition to passing another bill to reform the debt-ridden pension system for government employees. But President Park opposed the concession and vetoed the controversial law last week. Meanwhile, the NPAD continues to blast the ruling party for bowing to the president's wishes. Additionally, they have voiced strong criticism against President Park for pressuring Yoo to give up his post, emphasizing that the revisions to the parliamentary law received bipartisan support.
President Park Geun-hye's pressure on the ruling party floor leader to step down is itself unconstitutional behavior that encroaches on the National Assembly's rights and the separation of powers.
The NPAD is threatening to continue its boycott of all parliamentary sessions if the revised law isn't put up for a revote in the National Assembly. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
And President Park Geun-hye, who took direct aim at the embattled floor leader before vetoing the disputed parliamentary bill last week, instead focused on boosting the economy at a meeting today.
Some analysts say it's to show she will continue to manage state affairs regardless of the political disorder at the National Assembly. Our Choi Yoo-sun has this report.
Giving the domestic economy a shot in the arm, especially as the country deals with the economic impact of the MERS outbreak, was the main focus of Monday's Secretaries' meeting led by President Park Geun-hye.
우리 경제를 정상 성장 궤도로 하루빨리 복귀시키고 또 소비를 비롯해서 일상적 경제 활동이 제자리를 찾을 수 있도록 과감한 소비 진작 대책을 마련해야 하겠습니다.
Referring to the government's recently announced economic revitalization and reform policies for the latter half of this year, President Park stressed that time is of the essence in executing them.
타이밍을 놓치게 되면 돈은 돈대로, 재정은 재정대로 들어가면서 효과는 못 내기 때문에 결국 빚더미에 앉는 결과가 될 수밖에 없습니다.
The president also highlighted the business community's role in the economic revival efforts, saying businesses should fulfill their investment commitments and strive to spur domestic demand. Making no reference to the political upheaval amid disputed revisions to the National Assembly law, President Park, in a likely display of her commitment to revitalizing the economy, urged officials to speed up deregulation efforts to encourage both investment and job creation. She talked about removing regulations that have a greater ripple effect first and ensuring regulatory reforms are felt at every turn in society. The president also called for a progress checkup on the administration's annual tasks halfway through the year to make sure the outcome by the year's end will meet the target objectives. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
Now moving on to the latest regarding the MERS outbreak here in Korea. For 2 straight days now, no new patients have been reported, a positive sign that the government might be getting a grasp on the situation. On top of this, the first patient diagnosed with the deadly virus in Korea makes a full recovery. Our Kim Hyun-bin has the details.
Korea's first MERS patient has made a full recovery. The National Medical Center said Monday that patient number 1 is scheduled to come out of isolation on Monday after several genetic tests for the disease came out negative. The center added, however, that her health has deteriorated and she will have to go through rehabilitation. In addition to that bit of good news, no new cases were reported for a second consecutive day on Monday, for the first time in over a month. Health officials say this may be an indication that the outbreak may be on the wane. The number of people diagnosed with the disease is holding steady at 182, and the death toll also remains unchanged. Of those who have been diagnosed, 57 people remain hospitalized, with 14 currently in critical condition. The remaining 93 have been discharged from hospitals after making complete recoveries. Since the country reported its first MERS case in May, roughly 16,000 people have been subject to quarantine or isolation. Over 13,000 have been released so far, as they showed no signs of MERS after the incubation period, which is 14 days. There were still nearly 2,700 people in isolation for possible infection as of Monday, up by more than 100 from the previous day. Despite the suspected decrease in the number of MERS cases, officials are still keeping a close eye on Samsung Medical Center and Gangdong Sacred Heart Hospital, as both are seen as the epicenter of the disease. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Shifting gears now, the South Korean Navy held a commemorative event this Monday, marking the 13th anniversary of the Second Yunbyungse battle between the two Koreas. In the process of forcing the attackers to turn tail, 6 South Korean sailors lost their lives. Defense Minister Han Min-gu, who was attending the ceremony for the first time, vowed retaliation against North Korean provocations. Our Kim reports.
It was around 10:20 a.m. on June 29, 2002. When a deadly naval clash between the two Koreas in the West Sea left an indelible mark on Korean history. 2 North Korean patrol boats crossed the northern limit line, the de facto maritime border in the West Sea, and fired artillery rounds near the border island of Yunbyung. The clash ended about 30 minutes later when a North Korean patrol ship withdrew in flames. 6 South Korean sailors were left dead and 19 wounded. 13 years later, the soldiers' final sacrifices have still not been forgotten. They were honored again this year at a ceremony hosted by the Navy Chief of Staff and attended by roughly 700 people, including families of the victims and government officials. Defense Minister Han Min-gu, who was attending the ceremony for the first time, sent a strong message of warning to North Korea.
The Second Battle of Yunbyung was a victory of our military against North Korean provocations. It's a proud history that depicts our will to keep North Korean forces from capturing our territory.
He then read out the names of the 6 fallen soldiers, calling them heroes who defended South Korea from the enemy. The government is currently pushing to promote the 6 soldiers from martyrs to duty, to war dead, in response to criticism that the soldiers' achievements have not been fully acknowledged. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
A South Korean civilian group will visit North Korea on Tuesday to discuss the details of a planned trip there by the widow of former late President Kim Dae-jung. Seoul's Unification Ministry said Monday that it approved 5 representatives from the Kim Dae-jung Peace Center to travel to the North Korean border city of Kaesong. Former South Korean First Lady Lee Hee-ho is seeking to visit North Korea as early as next month. During a meeting with Prime Minister Hwang Ji-hye, Lee expressed hopes that her trip could pave the way for easing tensions on the Korean peninsula. The former First Lady has been seeking to visit the North to provide North Korean children with hand-knit hats, scarves, and clothes.
Greece's days in the eurozone and possibly the European Union could be numbered as the debt crisis has taken yet another turn for the worse. With its international creditors closing the door to a bailout extension, the Greek Prime Minister has confirmed that banks will be shut and capital controls imposed. Our Han Da-eun reports.
Greece's nightmare is fast becoming reality after its creditors, the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and the International Monetary Fund, rejected the troubled nation's request for an extension of its bailout program. As multiple sets of debt repayment due dates draw ever closer and with no money by which to pay them, Greeks have been rushing to ATMs to withdraw their savings, fearing the worst after Parliament's surprise referendum call on the creditors' take-it-or-leave-it bailout terms. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras has announced that banks will be shut on Monday while capital controls will be imposed. The country's stock exchange will also be closed on Monday.
This decision led the European Central Bank today to limit the liquidity of Greek banks and force the Central Bank of Greece to suggest a bank holiday and a restriction on bank withdrawals.
With the announcement, Greeks will have a cash withdrawal limit of about $66 per day, while payments and transfers abroad will be prohibited. Banks will reportedly close at least until July 6th, a day after the referendum. Greece is facing a $1.7 billion repayment to the IMF that's due Tuesday, and a nearly $3.9 billion repayment to the ECB on July 20th. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
And the Greek debt crisis sent shockwaves through global markets, especially in Europe and Asia. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports on how markets fared starting off in Korea.
The possible default in Greece has shaken up Korea's financial market. The benchmark Kospi dropped 1.4% on Monday from its previous trading day to close at 2,060. The Korea won also fell 0.8%, closing at 1,125 won against the greenback, the lowest level in 3 months. In response, the government has devised measures to offset possible risks to the local economy, starting with the creation of an inspection team this week to upgrade the country's monitoring systems that will help detect early warning signals. But Vice Finance Minister Chu Yong-won assured today that risks related to Greece will have limited impact on the domestic economy. And Korea is not the only country that's bracing for the worst. In Europe, markets in Germany and France were both down by more than 3%, while London's FTSE 100 index fell nearly 2% in early trade.
The markets have sold off quite aggressively on Monday morning. Unsurprisingly, we'd certainly got an indication of that on the Sunday prices we'd seen on the IG platform.
The Shanghai Composite Index and Japan's Nikkei also tumbled by around 8% and 3% respectively. The euro sank 0.6% against the dollar to nearly $1.11. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
In stark contrast is a celebratory mood in China as a country marks its milestone in its foreign policy today with the signing of a formal charter for the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank in Beijing. The bank, seen as a rival to other multinational financial organizations like the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, is set to begin operations next year. For this report, we turn to our Shin Se-min.
Representatives from 57 founding nations gathered in Beijing to sign articles of agreement for China's biggest foreign policy achievement yet, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Korea, as a founding member, has vowed active cooperation with the bank.
Korea's participation in the AIIB will help create business opportunities in the construction, communication, and IT infrastructure sectors.
The bank will start with an authorized capital of $100 billion. China holds the largest share with 30%, followed by India and Russia. For its part, Korea is chipping in a total of over $3.7 billion of capital through 2019. As the fifth largest shareholder, Korea has a near 4% stake in the bank, the most it has ever held in any global financial organization.
The large share will help Korean companies expand their businesses into third countries, using some of the world's top infrastructure skills.
Experts say, however, that more negotiations are needed as Korea is aiming to secure a standing manager post or win one of the vice governor slots to improve opportunities for Korean companies.
But questions over the infrastructure of the bank remain.
Despite the hope that Korea, along with other member nations, will have a say in decision-making process, worries persist over the transparency of the AIIB as China could try to exploit its power in raising its economic and geopolitical influence within the region. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Despite the lingering economic uncertainties around the world, Korea's economic growth over the past decade has remained relatively strong in comparison to that of other OECD member countries. For more on this report, we turn to our Son Jung-in.
Korea came in at 6th place out of 34 member countries in terms of economic growth rate, growing at an average of 3.7% per year during the period between 2005 and 2014, according to data released by the OECD on Monday. That's 2.5 times higher than the OECD average of 1.5%. Chile ranked first on the list with an average annual expansion of 4.2% during the same period, followed by Turkey, Israel, Poland, and Slovakia. Australia and Mexico came behind Korea in 7th and 8th places, respectively. The latest figure for Korea represents an outstanding performance for the country when compared to countries with a per capita GDP exceeding $30,000. The top 6 countries on the list, with the exception of Korea and Israel, all had a per capita GDP in the $20,000 range. Also, unlike many OECD members that suffered a period of weak or negative growth right after the 2008 global financial crisis, Korea remained relatively stable. Korea recorded the lowest fall among the top 6 countries on the list from 2009 to 2014. Financial experts say now it's time for Korea to come up with a new economic policy while simultaneously pushing for structural reforms as the period of rapid economic growth for the country has come to an end. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
The second hearing in a multi-billion-dollar international lawsuit filed by the U.S. private equity firm Lonestar against the Korean government resumes in Washington today. The International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes reported that the two sides are scheduled to meet back in court on Monday. The session will proceed for 10 days and will focus on whether the Korean government's taxation on Lonestar was fair. Lonestar filed the $4.7 billion case against the Korean government in the late 2012, claiming it was forced to pay unfair taxes in addition to losing profits in its asset sell-offs in Korea. Time to take a look at the top international headlines. We connect to our Paul Yi at the News Center.
Paul, though a lot of our focus has been on the Greek debt crisis today, the deadly attack in Tunisia is also contributing to draw significant attention. The British Prime Minister was the latest to condemn the massacre.
That's right. In a statement on Monday, David Cameron described the attack as an example of evil religious extremism and called for efforts to deal with this threat at its source, namely Syria and Iraq. The call to action comes as 30 British nationals were reportedly among the 38 people killed at a beach resort last Friday. The lone gunman who was shot dead by police has since been identified as Saifuddin Razgi. Close family members of the 23-year-old said there was little warning that he would turn to radical violence.
I would have never guessed that he would commit such atrocity. We didn't notice anything. We were not able to imagine that he could do such a thing.
Earlier, a candlelight vigil was held in the Tunisian city of Sousse, where the attack took place. Fellow grieving tourists and local residents laid flowers and paid tribute to the victims, many of whom were on vacation from Europe. And turning to the United States, a manhunt for 2 convicted killers who escaped from a maximum security prison has come to a dramatic end with the capture of the last fugitive. On Sunday, 35-year-old David Sweat was shot twice and captured by police near the Canadian border. He was walking down an open roadway some 260 kilometers from the correctional facility he broke out of.
As I'm sure you've heard already, the nightmare is finally over. It took 22 days, but we can now confirm, as of 2 days ago, as you know, Mr. Matt is deceased, and the other escapee, Mr. Sweat, is in custody. He's in stable condition. And let's give a big round of applause to the men and women of law enforcement who have done a great job.
Sweat had been on the run from state and federal authorities for the past 3 weeks. Police say his accomplice was shot and killed after being spotted in upstate New York. And finally, an investigation is underway into the catastrophic failure of a SpaceX rocket that exploded in mid-air over Florida on Sunday. A private U.S. space firm said it would ground the Falcon 9 rocket for several months, stressing that it had flown 18 successful missions over the past 5 years. The unnamed spacecraft, which had been carrying supplies to the International Space Station, was destroyed less than 3 minutes after taking off.
Again, this is a blow to us. We lost a lot of important research equipment on this flight. We lost the IDA, the docking adapter that we had planned to set us up for later. Again, we'll be able to recover from that. We lost a spacesuit. Again, we'll see how we can recover from that. And we lost a lot of research.
Nearly 2.5 tons of food, equipment, and science experiments bound for the ISS were lost in the explosion. It marks the second failed mission to resupply the orbital station this year, casting doubts over the future of the private space industry. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
The new week got off to a muggy start, but some relief is in store on Tuesday as a monsoon front makes its way over the Korea Peninsula again, mainly hitting the southern provinces. So Jeju Island will receive the most rain, somewhere between 30 to 80 millimeters, and southern regions can expect moderate amount of showers, whereas upper north will only see light drizzles passing by. And the mix of clouds and rain will bring down temperatures in many parts. Highs will be 4 to 9 degrees lower than today, only hovering in the low to mid 20s across the nation. So let's take a closer look at tomorrow's temperature. Seoul will hike up to 27, and Daegu and Gwangju top out at 23, and Busan will only make it to 22 tomorrow afternoon. And as for the other parts, it seems like Daejeon and Jeju Island will see a high of 25 and 28, while Dokdo rises to 22. Now, after the rains taper off, things are looking dry for the rest of the week, and temperatures will also stick near seasonal averages under partly sunny skies nationwide. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
A picture paints 1,000 words, even better with more words in those pictures. Well, that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you so much for staying with us. This has been Daniel Choy.
And I'm Hwang Ji-hye. Please join us at the same time tomorrow. Goodbye for now.